Hi, Dr. G here. Hope you're ready to begin Module 3. In our Module 3, we will be looking at the next stage or the next piece of curriculum, which is curriculum development. I would like to review these goals for this particular module. In this module, you're going to be learning a lot about how the large-scale planning comes down to small-scale planning. So how we go from national planning or planning done by national organizations for curriculum down to the smaller scale of district and school planning curriculum. We're going to talk about the importance of a needs assessment and what is a needs assessment and what are the components of a good needs assessment and why we do this before we actually begin getting in depth into planning a curriculum. We're going to talk about the importance of understanding what the needs of our group is that we're trying to reach and the community that they live in, why that is important toward our curriculum planning. We're also going to help you distinguish between curriculum goals and curriculum objectives. For many of you that have been teaching for a while, this might be just some review. Hopefully we can introduce a thing or two that might be new or a term that you have not heard before as we're going through this. And we're going to learn how each of these things function differently within a curriculum plan. And then in Chapter 6, you're really going to explore the importance of technology and the consideration of technology infrastructure, the technology training needs of teachers, the technology skills of students that are within a certain district, and how all of this is now very much impacting how curriculum is written and developed. Many of you chose the technology that you felt like technology was going to be one of the greatest impacting one of the things that would most greatly impact the development of curriculum over the next few years. And actually it already is impacting curriculum. Before we get started though, I wanted to just try to start pulling some pieces together. This is our third week, and I know we only have 5 weeks and we cram as much in as possible. But one of the things that I do want you to be able to do is to articulate a definition of what exactly curriculum means to you. And right now, my guess is you probably don't have a very solid definition of what curriculum is. There are rather so many different definitions of curriculum. It's very oftentimes fragmented and very confusing. But these definitions, the reason they're that way is because they are so impacted by by individuals' thoughts, their philosophies, their pedagogies, their cultural experiences, political climates. There's so many things that come into play when we start talking about exactly what curriculum is. And there's many different views to look at curriculum from. So back in the first couple of chapters, you explored some of the different ways that people view education. And I had you think about how you view that process of thinking and learning and see if you could match up the way you think with some of the big, broad philosophies about education that have been proposed. And essentially, those 5 or 6 philosophies that you looked at could really be divided into 2 great big ones, great big categories. one being a traditional view of curriculum and one being a more progressive view of curriculum. And in that more traditional view, that's where people tend to view curriculum. It's a body of subjects and subject material, content that teachers teach with and students are to learn. So it's basically just that idea that course of study. And in college, we might equate that with a syllabus. Most of the time, the more traditional views of curriculum look at just focusing on reading, writing, and arithmetic, those 3 R's. But we know there's so much more to curriculum than just those 3 subject areas. It's all intertwined and embedded. In a more traditional view of curriculum, it's seen or viewed as something that is pretty stagnant. It's the same for everybody, everywhere, no matter what. There's no differentiation made for students. And the knowledge that comes into play comes from the discipline, the specific discipline that it's written for. Then when we think about a more progressive view of curriculum, we're looking at a definition that John Dewey would find a lot more appealing, okay? Because we're looking at curriculum being that total learning experience for a student. So the environment, the teaching strategies, the teacher who is involved in the process, and John Dewey felt that reflective thinking is a way to unify our thoughts and ideas about things. So he would see curriculum as being something that is fluid and changing and very dynamic. So when we think about this progressive view, we want to think about all those experiences that a child might have under the guidance of the teacher, those things that are planned, and then also those serendipitous moments that are unplanned when things happen and we learn from experiences that weren't written down in a plan book. Generally, even in this progressive view, the curriculum tends to be sequenced, and the plan is set up based on the needs of the students and the school that they're in. So here's what I would say if someone asked me about my definition for curriculum. And I want you to think about how you would define curriculum. So my definition goes along that lines, more Dewey-esque, more progressive, because I see curriculum as being a very dynamic process. I see it as being developmental. Because it's dynamic, I view it as having opportunities for modifications or improvements, and that those improvements should have substance behind them. In other words, there should be reason. And I see that it should be a circular process, in that it should always be looking and going under review, and it does involve everything that a child or a student or an individual would go through within a learning process. So that's my definition of curriculum. So thinking about those things, what do you think your definition of curriculum might be? You may want to stop and jot down a few notes. The next term, and this is a term that comes along with this next chapter, is this idea of curriculum planning. And what is curriculum planning? And for our purposes, we're going to say that curriculum planning is determining the content. Now, we know from our explorations in Module 1 and Module 2 that our content comes predominantly from our standards, whether they are Common Core standards or whether they are the SOLs, or in South Carolina, they're the BSAP, the South Carolina Basic Skills Assessment Profile. But those standards, which have come nationally or because of national standards, like here in Virginia, we chose not to accept the national standards, so we have our own standards. Those are what guide and determine the content of our curriculum, which is part of our curriculum planning. The other piece of our curriculum planning is thinking about our learning resources. That can be anything from the environment to things like our technology, to our teachers, to personnel that help. So learning resources is not just necessarily a textbook or a piece of software. We want to think about in curriculum planning, what are the roles of our teachers, of our educators going to be in the curriculum process? And then most importantly, how are we going to go back and evaluate the progress of our curriculum plan? Because earlier I mentioned I feel like curriculum is a developmental way of grouping and organizing materials to teach, and it's a whole comprehensive piece of what happens to a learner in the learning process, and that has to involve evaluating how things are going. And that's more than evaluating learner success, but that's also evaluating the whole process of learning. The next term that's a little bit different from the planning piece is the actual development, the actual doing. And in curriculum development, this is a process where we really begin looking, selecting, and organizing and evaluating all the learning materials and experiences. And we do this based on our philosophies and beliefs about how students learn, and about what we know and find out about our students' needs, their abilities, their interests. And this is where that needs assessment piece that you're going to be learning about in this chapter 5 is, that's why I said it's so crucial. Okay? So start beginning to think, if someone in a job interview asks you what curriculum is, how you might define that particular term.